I think I already know what I'm gonna go with, but this should help us discover what we want to play as our first class in D4.
Diablo IV's beta will feature all 5 classes, namely the Barbarian, Sorceress, Rogue, Druid, and Necromancer.
Okay, let's check out the
The
Barbarian.
Barbarian class is suitable for players who wish to deal massive destruction in melee range while being able to seamlessly switch from one weapon type to the next. Due to their unique class mechanic, which is known as the Arsenal system, Barbarians can equip and swap about 4 weapons at a time, allowing for better customization.
Okay, so they can also do this with different attacks. From what I'm understanding, you can set up different weapons for different attacks. So imagine your hotkeys in D2, right? And you have like Whirlwind and then you have Berserk. You can set it up so that when you cast Berserk, it goes with like an axe. And when you cast Whirlwind, it goes with like a polearm. That's the arsenal system that they're talking about. I think this actually goes layers deep with this class. And I think the Barbarian is actually going to be one of the most powerful classes. And I'll talk about that more in a second. But I think this arsenal system and the way that they have everything else set up about the game, having these additional spots for weapons, especially in a game that's designed the way they designed it, is going to be very, very powerful.
Because of this, it's highly recommended to collect and prepare a wide variety of melee weapons in order to take advantage of this class's build diversity and itemization progression.
And that's also a good point, which, and we'll skip to the next class here, but that's also a good point, which I think when we talk about the itemization of this in a bit, I think that right there is going to be why this class is OP. It has a lot to do with the itemization. So yeah, good class. I honestly think Barbarian, it may be a class that I choose, but I think I'm going to pick something else. So Cold Sorceresses are probably going to be what a lot of people pick in D4. That's going to be, I would say, the route that most people go. In D4, Sorceresses have this, they're the only class that has this thing called the enchantment ability. And it basically allows you to take other skills and enchant their effects into other spells that you're using. You can basically combine these things. So like just imagine in D2, you cast a Blizzard and it has a chance to cast Ice Blasts or Ice Bolts when it hits. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Like you can enchant different skills. So I think there's going to be a large reward for committing to one tree. Here's my big problem with the Sorceress though. And here's why I think a lot of people are going to pick the Sorceress and why I think classic Diablo 2 players are going to be sorely disappointed by the Sorceress. And that is the mobility will not be the same as your traditional Diablo 2 player expects it to be. It's going to work more like D3, where the Sorceress teleport has a cooldown, right? So yeah, theoretically you can move, you can teleport to a certain area, but like the cooldown is like 10 seconds. The mobility certainly won't be the same. You won't be like zipping through the map and speedrunning the game with teleport. That being said, there are mounts in the game, that will help you traverse the map, much like there was in Diablo Immortal, right? Like the mounts are cool, you can zip through the map, but that mobility doesn't feel the same as D2. Now, granted, there's also some people in D2 that hated teleport and thought that teleport ruined the game. But regardless, I think the pacing of D4, because of this approach from the devs, will be a bit slower with pacing. This guy breaks down all of the skills. Like I think this video was cool. Breaks down the strengths and weaknesses of classes, but then also like shows off some skills. If you're a classic D2 player, right? And let's say you haven't played a lot of D3, you haven't played a lot of Diablo Immortal, this might be a little overwhelming, seeing a skill like this, right? And knowing that you have enhancements, enchantments, upgrades, and all of this, that you have to understand how they synergize with each other and play it out and test it. Which is why I hope the respeccing early on is very forgiving, especially in the open beta. Perhaps even make it free. Something like this, like lucky hit percentage, all of these enhancements, enchantments, things, these will pop up in something that can be toggled in the menu for D4. You can turn this off and make it kind of simple. Like it will just say Firebolt, hurl a flaming firebolt, deal 10% damage.
You'll want to allocate points into intelligence to boost the damage of your spells, dexterity to raise mana recovery, and lastly, willpower to improve your critical chance.
This is also something that it won't be necessarily similar to D2. I think it's the same in spirit though, but it's certainly something that everybody should know going into D4. Intelligence, dexterity, willpower, and something else. Oh, strength, sorry. So you have those 4 things, and they all work differently on different classes. Now that's the same in D2, like obviously dexterity will act as a damage boost for Amazons with ranged weapons, or really any character using ranged weapons. The intelligence or mana energy in D2 will give more mana to a sorceress at the core than it will, say, a barbarian, and the opposite is true for vitality, or in this case, willpower being the closest to that. They all work differently for different classes. This will be certainly different than what a lot of D2 players are used to, because you can't just dump everything into vitality anymore. Like, you actually have to balance your character with the stat points. So another hurdle there, I think, for people who have only played D2. But hopefully it's pretty easy. I'm assuming it'll be pretty easy, or even just having a simple understanding of what's good for your class will help guide you as you're making your character. Let's check out the next class here. This is, what is
Adept
this?
at moving swiftly so they can choose to reposition themselves to gain the upper hand in combat or retreat when things get too precarious. Your primary stats for this class include dexterity to amplify skill damage and improve dodge ability, strength to enhance your energy regeneration rate, and intelligence to improve your critical chance and overall resistance.
Okay, so this is the class right here that I believe I will start with because of a lot of reasons. First and foremost, you hear Joe Shelley and a couple of other game devs and game designers talking very highly about their excitement of this class. And I think this is the real reason as to why they're hyped up about this. Because they have actually spent the most time balancing this class and making this class feel the best for the entire D4 experience. It tells me that this might actually be the most powerful class. That's one reason. Okay, but the other reason, and we can dive into the, the itemization of it here. One of the other reasons why I think this class is going to be so powerful is, much like the Barbarian, it has an additional item slot, which I think is a overpowered thing in D4. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you a little bit about the itemization reason as to why I think that's a good thing. This game was not designed around free trade. Okay, like, we can pretty much kiss it goodbye. So the itemization of this means that playing through solo or with a small team, you should be able to find, the drop rates should not be astronomically low. You should be able to find most of the items that you need for the level that you're at. I don't think that's going to be as hard as people think. I think with the way that they've designed the game, you're going to be able to easily get these weapons. The guy in this video compares this class to like a, like a Amazon and a Demon Hunter. I honestly think that this would be like more of a, for D2 players, think of the Assassin. I think it would actually be pretty close of a comparison from what I gather to the Assassin. You have these nasty auxiliary crowd control effects like that, slowing down time, the time warp or whatever, almost like Mind Blast to some degree. You're basically freezing monsters in place. They can't do anything. You have a bow here, but you would have traps on an Assassin for ranged. And then you have like the martial arts, the up close, right? Hopefully far better balanced on this character. But I think it's probably more analogous to the play style of an Assassin. Which, as you know, big fan of that early game in D2. I think that's super overpowered. So I'm assuming, with all of these things considered, the devs' hype about this class, likely their big focus on this class, the extra item slot, and the fact that this compares to an Assassin in D2, in my opinion, I think this is going to be a very powerful class.
The next class we're going to take a look at is the Druid, who has the uncanny ability to change their physical form from a human to that of a werebear or a werewolf.
This is the Druid.
Compared to Druids in Diablo II, Druids can now instantly transform when using their beast-themed skills prior to executing the corresponding actions. Unlike in Diablo II, Druids have companions that do not need to be summoned but are automatically called out to attack on their behalf. However, they do have respective attack companion skills to deal damage on certain targets.
The Druid will certainly be a powerful class, but it will also be a very complicated class. It will not feel like the Druid in D2. If you're expecting to be able to morph into a werebear or a werewolf and go slay people or slay demons in that form, it doesn't quite work like that. You have, think about the Barbarian that we talked about with different skills being associated to different weapons. How this seems like it's going to be is different attacks are associated with different forms. So you might have Fury hotkeyed and you'll temporarily morph into a werewolf and smack your opponent and then morph back. It makes me wonder how much you'll have to split the character tree and specialization between these different forms and how much it's going to pay off. The question becomes, in D4, how many skill points do we have to allocate to pets and morphing into different forms versus using the elements like a NATO Druid? You can cast NATO and Hurricane in this too. How much do you sacrifice by going down that road? I think certainly a Druid will be very powerful. I think they'll certainly also be very complicated.
The final class in Diablo IV is the Necromancer, who is a renowned summoner, often resurrecting corpses to fight with them in battle. Like barbarians and rogues, a wide variety of weapons are available to them, such as swords, daggers, wands, and more importantly, scythes, which only they can wield.
You mean to tell a barbarian in this game he finds a scythe on the ground, he can't pick it up and swing it at people? Come on, bro.
Another useful resource is corpses, which are created from the remains of fallen enemies or other spell effects. In fact, you can even make use of the fan favorite Corpse Explosion.
Of course. This is exactly like what you would expect, right? This is a Diablo Immortal Necro. This is a D3 Necro. This is basically a D2 Necro early game, right? Which is why I think a lot of people are going to pick this. The class will probably be powerful because how can Corpse Explosion not be powerful? A lot of people are going to opt for the Necro because it's OP and feels familiar, and doesn't necessarily rely on the skellies being meat shields as much as it does AI that plays the game for you. And then you just cast Corpse Explosion. It's basically been the same in every Diablo title since they introduced the Necromancer, right? Whether they played Diablo 3, Diablo Immortal, Diablo 2, the Necro has barely ever changed. It's going to feel familiar, and when this comes out, I think a lot of people are going to pick it over the Druid in the second week because they will then finally be able to feel the game on a class that feels familiar to them. Myself included, I'll probably pick the Necro week 2. But I think for sure, I'm gonna just be going with that Rogue, boys. Like, I'm gonna just be going with that Rogue. I think it's gonna be a very overpowered class. A lot of people are underestimating it. I think Joe Shelley and a lot of the other game designers and game devs have spent a lot of time on balancing it and making it feel powerful. So we're gonna reap the benefits of it. I think we're gonna start up with a Rogue. We're gonna beat the game as far as we can at level 25. And maybe we'll have some time to grief some players while we're at it, you know? We're gonna see. What else did they expect letting me into this beta, boys? Let's be real.